generational curses. But if you will not know yourselves, you dwell in poverty, and it is you who are that poverty. So said Jesus in the Gospel of Thomas, saying 3. Powerful indeed, and if that's you, that was certainly me. Poverty mindset perpetuated and handed down as your birthright, and you know it's not a good place to be. But by the end of this video, my hope is that you will be able to not only identify, but forever break from your generational curses. To start, while it is surfacely unfathomable for you to think you are seeking out and therefore creating a life of generational curseness, your inability to see and therefore create a new cycle for yourself is proof one way or the other. Consider this quote from Lao Tzu on how we get stuck. The man who is truly wise and kind leaves nothing to be done, but he who acts according to his nation's law leaves many things undone. Now think of your nation's law that Lao Tzu referred to as your family and environment, which are the most powerful impediments to you believing against and ultimately breaking your curse. Of course, it is also precisely why you are what you believe you are. Simplified. Let's start with defining the generational curse your family has left you, how it holds you, which is at minimum twofold. First, they never changed your environment, home and outside. That's a big deal. Second, they never taught you how to think as I or self. And that's an even bigger deal. Environment. Multifaceted for sure, but before we break it down, let's start by agreeing to a very simple premise, that you have identified that you don't want to be anything like anyone else in your family home environment for whatever the reason. They're addicts, abusers, broke bums and all that. We get it, we got it. You want out. That is just one form of home and environmental reality influencing your cursed beliefs. In this case, showing you how you'll likely end up if you insist on following family tradition, which you are trying to escape. Therefore, what I'm about to say next is super important, so please try to follow as we delve deeper. Jean Piaget, who is a Swiss psychologist with a focus on child development, stated the following: knowledge doesn't begin in the I, and it does not begin in the object. It begins in the interactions. Then there is a reciprocal and simultaneous construction of the subject on the one hand and the object on the other. Keep that in mind as we describe your environment and how it relates to you. Generationally cursed as such. For every time you go outside to experience life into what you believe is more truth than reality, leveraging the external and extrinsic nature of the visual sense of life, your eyes, with which you see and if not careful will deceive you. The idea that you have learned to interact and believe what you see only because of and by what you see and identify in your physical reality, your environment. For example, whenever I left my apartment in the projects, it was not uncommon for an addict to be shooting up in the staircase, urine to be all over the floor, dealers to be in the lobby, and on and on and on with the standard poverty cursed visual. Emphasis on, as you are seeing this, you are interacting with this, you are now accepting and believing of this, then the mythical concept of seek and thee shall find fully applies. Yes, you are constructed to consciously seek this external stimuli to validate what you believe. Living in your defined state of being, generationally cursed. And in this case, your unconsciousness state of cursedness equates to submissive conformity to your environment for the perceived sake of survivability. Meaning, every time you engage and interact with your environment, behaving and interacting as a cursed culture, ironically and likely to ensure you're stable in your environment, for fear that you can't deviate from your environmental behavior, because not conforming to cursed culture, that brings danger. Example, imagine walking out to a generationally cursed environment and announcing to everyone that you won't live like this, which is how they live, and then actually deciding not to live like this around everyone living like this. We know you'd be ostracized and considered an outcast, including in your own home. Paradoxically, no one given truth serum actually wants to be there, but you feel forced and obligated and interact like this in order to survive, because silently you believe everything you have been trained to see. Back to Piaget, the construction of the subject and its exposure to object, your environment. Therefore, the initial dilemma is with refusing to believe you are generationally cursed, which is to say, I am not generationally cursed, is to first see that you are not generationally cursed, which is obviously complicated given your external environment, constantly reinforcing your beliefs to you visually. Meaning, the complexity to this is that you must believe your eyes actually are deceiving, that what you don't see or that what you see doesn't have to be, by learning the power to change how you see it. Said another way, you must consciously reject the reality of your cursed outside environment. Otherwise, hitherto, seek and thee shall find applies. And now, therefore, ask and it shall be given to you. That's environment. Now on to how to think for self. Piaget, again, knowledge doesn't begin in the I, and I is, of course, self. As you are seeing and seeing and seeing, and the reason I began externally and focused distinctly on your environment is because before you came to consciousness about your own self, I, the home within, your perception of who you thought you were supposed to be was already manipulating and influencing you subconsciously before you awakened. Seeing it, forcing your believing, the construction of the subject through its interactions. Here's what this now comes down to. Let's start with a question. What are you really saying to you that comes from you? If you are generationally cursed, then the answer is nothing. What do you believe that you decided to believe for yourself? If you are generationally cursed, then the answer is nothing. Have you ever stopped to realize that you are constantly aware even when you are unaware? Not likely. Not only that, but you also have total control of what you are unaware of when you are unaware based on what you are aware of. This is what this will always come down to. Your conscious and your subconscious. You are either cursed or not, depending on what you believe. And because you were never taught how to think of self, you therefore have adopted fear-based consciousness and broken sponsoring thoughts. And the sponsoring thought is, of course, one of our hot fixes. What is a sponsoring thought? Great question. It is, in short, your first thought, which is the thought behind the thought behind the thought that produces many similar thoughts, thereby influencing your behavior and identity, producing your reality. It is the fundamental belief of who you think you are, respective to who you think you are. Let me explain and highlight in a quick visual. All right, so you know what a sponsoring thought is. The thought behind the thought behind the thought. It's the first thought. The significance is this. That first thought will create many other thoughts like it in order to validate it as truth. So if you look at what you see in front of you, you have identity, finances, and career as a quick appreciation for what this is. This could be many other things. You can add relationships, your physical, your spiritual, and on and on and on. The idea is that your belief system started here. So if we look at and focus on identity to begin, what is likely your sponsoring thought for your identity? That you are generationally cursed. The significance of that being your sponsoring thought is that now it gives birth to other like-minded thoughts. Maybe you think you're a born sinner. Maybe you think you're not good enough. Maybe you have addict habits. This is likely built around and derived from fear, uncertainty, and doubt. Thereby, as your identity and being generationally cursed, creating and reinforcing that reality for you. If you move on to finances, if you believe you are broke, then guess what? That is your sponsoring thought. So that might lead to you thinking other things like, money is the root of all evil. Crazy. Money doesn't grow on trees. I think it does. And on and on. If you look at your career, a lot of us have, actually all of us really have creative aspirations and something to do that is in us that God has chosen you to do. Whether you run away from it or not is not part of that conversation, but you traded it. You traded maybe your career path and vision for, I just need to be secure. And that comes with thinking things like, what else am I going to do with my career? I'm not going to start that business because no one really makes it out from my generational curses. See how that ties into? I need to maybe, if you're from my environment, I need to rap, sell drugs or play sports. That's the only way to get out. Ultimately, too, breaking it down to, I just need to make a living. These sponsoring thoughts are critical in the I, in the self, in who you believe you are, and ultimately, as we'll get into later, knowing that thoughts create feelings, create actions, create behavior, which is your identity. These constant thoughts, whether conscious or unconscious, are systematically creating whatever you see for yourself, whether you believe it or not. Think about it. All right, cool beans. I love me some slides. So now that we have an appreciation for the complexity of generational curses, possibly being twofold, your environmental factors are influencing your belief system and thereby creating a sponsoring thought of being generationally cursed, what do we do now? We first have to realize that if we believe we are cursed, then we are currently living in fear-based consciousness. And that's a good start. Reason being, if we are living in fear-based consciousness, then we are simultaneously conscious of its alternate or perceived opposite. And I use opposite loosely, but even before I explain that, you must first align with the premise of all creation is possible through the option of fear and love, from which all other possibilities derive from. This is language and word, of course, merely to express emotion. Emotion is significant because it's also essentially energy in motion, also known as feelings. And feeling has everything to do with your life and how your reality is formed. Now back to feelings of fear and love. Realities are available to us through polarities, meaning opposite ends of the spectrum. In other words, imagine, if you would, that generational curses, which is fear-based consciousness and imprisonment, are positioned in the South Pole. That would imply that generational blessedness, love-based consciousness, and freedom are positioned at the North Pole. One requires the other to exist. Its roots are fear and love. The significance here, again, is twofold. You could not know and identify poverty without simultaneously knowing and identifying with prosperity. You could not know or identify cold without simultaneously knowing and identifying with hot. It exists in congruence. As above, so below. You must know one to know the other. Otherwise, you couldn't identify it. The second significant piece being, as one requires the other to exist, they are technically on the same universal vibrational frequency, just polar opposites. So as you believe you are poor, you are on the same vibrational frequency as rich, just opposite ends. As you believe you are weak, you are on the same vibrational frequency as strength, just opposite ends. As you believe you are cursed, you are on the same vibrational frequency as blessed. You must change your end of the spectrum. How might we do it? Of course it takes work. Hear this line. Man has to fight his way out of history, not simply awaken from it. Therefore, you can't change your energy until you feel how you think, until you feel how you speak, until you feel how you behave. That is emotion, energy, and motion. It must all feel the same to you. That is the love end of the polar spectrum. Now, how can we truly cultivate this? Let's review the creation process really quick. Now, I'm going to go through this process of creation with you, but this is all really predicated again on energy, which is emotion, energy and motion, your feelings, all right? So what you'll find is the first step in the creation process, and this is a lot of what we think it is, are our thoughts, because we're constantly thinking. That is the I, the ego, and the self. Those thoughts lead to feelings, which then lead to actions, thereby creating your reality. Now, there is significance here in this. You can see arrows in that all of this needs to kind of interoperate. I use the word congruence, harmony, unity. All of these processes should ideally be in complete alignment with one another. Your thoughts should not be different from your feelings and your actions. But before I do that, I digress. The significance of why I reference that is you'll see that the circles are drawn into each other, not separate and disparate. The idea and process of changing your energy is to ensure, as what I said, you have to think the way you feel and feel the way you think and act the way you feel, which is how you're thinking, to create your reality. Makes sense, right? Here's the difficulty, if you're having difficulty in believing you are cursed, is that your reality, of course, is already here and you're cursed, but you're still thinking thoughts, you're still feeling feelings, and you're still behaving and acting. The reason why I drew these separate is because as I referenced that there should be congruence, harmony, unity, and alignment, your thoughts right now are different from how you're feeling, are different from how you're behaving. Even if you try to rectify or move in any one of these directions to more positivity, you ultimately come back to continuing to feel that root cause, that sponsoring thought of being cursed, which is really what creates your reality. And since you don't have control of your feelings, you're behaving as you're cursed and thinking as you're cursed, all somewhat separate, and you can't really put them all together and align it. That is the difficulty you're having. What do we do? Because that has to be the next question. I talked about this before. It's reverse engineering. Because, as Piaget said, you have already been influenced, you have already been interacting, you are already here. Starting with your thoughts is difficult because you're going to continue to see what you don't want to see. So a lot of the processes for reshifting and reshaping yourself has to be in your behavior. I know, most of the times you don't feel like doing it. It's a standard cliche motivational thing. But the significance of pushing past through your actions of what you don't feel like doing is you start to change how you feel about doing the things, which then changes your thoughts of how you're feeling about doing the things, thereby creating a different reality. So the truth that you are seeking is to behave as someone who is not generationally cursed, so you can feel as someone who's not generationally cursed, and thereby think as someone who's not generationally cursed, and recreate that interoperability, recreate that harmony and that process so that the reality you seek, shape, and shift into, the energy and motion, the emotion, is harmonious. It continues to be cyclical, but in an interoperable way, congruent way, streamlined way, in a unified or unity way. So your reality matches exactly who you're thinking like, feeling like, and being like. Matches who you're being like, feeling like, and thinking like, no matter which direction it's in. That is the unification of the creation process. That is how we break our generational curses. That is how we find new energy, create new emotion to start feeling on the love consciousness spectrum. Pretty dope. Let me know what you think about that. All right, cool. Remember when I started this with the Gospel of Thomas and the Jesus saying about knowing yourself? Here's the entirety of that word and passage. Jesus said, whoever finds the interpretations of these sayings will not experience death. Let him who seeks continue seeking until he finds. When he finds, he will become troubled. When he becomes troubled, he will be astonished, and he will rule over all. If those who lead you say to you, see, the kingdom is in the sky, then the birds of the sky will precede you. If they say to you, it is in the sea, then the fish will precede you. Rather, the kingdom is inside of you, and it is outside of you. When you come to know yourselves, then you will become known, and you will realize that it is you who are the sons of the living Father. But if you will not know yourselves, you dwell in poverty, and it is you who are that poverty. You are not generationally cursed. Change your mind, change your life. I am who I say I am. Stay rich.